Hey there, this is Todd with Industrial Comfort. Today I'm in the candy business and I'm going to show you how to make a candy dispenser like this for your kids. Not that they need any more sugar.
I'm going to start by working backwards for a minute to explain the fundamentals of what I'm doing here. So there are 3 panels. Each panel has a hole in it. The concept is that the candy falls through the hole in the first panel to the second panel, which is the slide. The slide then gets pulled back and the candy then falls through the hole in the third panel and down the chute. Here we take a look at the actual dispenser so that you can see what I'm referring to. There's the first hole. The candy falls into the second hole, which is the slide, and then the slide pulls the candy forward into the third hole and drops it down into the chute. Here are the dimensions of the components for the candy dispenser, along with the placement of the 1-inch diameter holes. Now, if you're observant, you'll notice that the holes I drill in the wood in the video don't match this diagram. That's because I made a number of adjustments on the fly as I was building the dispenser. I start the project by cutting 3 3 1/4 sections from a piece of 2x4. Now, the diagram that I showed a minute ago is dependent on lengths of 3 1/4 inches for these pieces. I then take one of the pieces and cut it at a 30-degree angle, and this will serve as the chute for the candy dispenser. I then laminate the 3 pieces of wood with the chute in the center. Now keep in mind that this 2x4 has been planed, so the dimensions will be slightly off from the widths that you saw in the earlier diagram, but this will not affect the placement of the 1-inch diameter holes provided that they're centered. For the next step, I take a piece of 1/4-inch plywood and I cut it to the same dimension as the 3 pieces of 2x4 that I just glued together. I then drill a 1-inch hole, which is going to serve as the trap door for the candy, and I glue that up to the 3 pieces of 2x4 that I just laminated. I cut a piece of plywood to match the dimensions of the front of the candy dispenser while adding 3/4 of an inch to the height to accommodate the slide. I then cut a 1.5-inch circle 2 inches up in the center of this board, then use the bandsaw to cut a doorway, which is where the candy will dispense from. I then cut a 3/4 by 1-inch rectangle in the top of this piece of wood that will serve as the location for the slide handle. I cut a second piece of plywood to match the dimensions of the first that I just cut and laminate both to the candy dispenser body. Next, I grab a piece of plywood that's the same width and depth as the candy dispenser with the glued front and back. I then drill a 3-inch hole with a Forstner bit, and I cut that piece of wood such that the opening of the hole here on this circle matches the 1.5 inches of the doorway of the dispenser. I then glue that to another piece of wood that's the same width and depth as the dispenser, and then I round it out on the belt grinder. I'm going to apologize, I didn't do a great job filming this next segment, but essentially you want to drill an 1-inch in diameter hole in a piece of plywood that's going to match the interior dimensions of the candy dispenser. Now, as you can see here, I cut out a T. I then drill a hole through that T. I cut the head off a screw so that I can thread it into a standard cabinet knob, which I will then feed into the hole that I just drilled into the T that has the 1-inch hole diameter in it. And this will serve as the slide mechanism inside the candy dispenser. At this point, we will glue the candy dish to the bottom of the dispenser. I then take 2 1/4-inch pieces of ply and I laminate them to each side of the candy dispenser. For the top of the dispenser, I cut a piece of plywood to match the dimensions of the dispenser and cut an inch hole to match the hole in the slide. I then epoxy on a mason jar lid, which has a hole cut to the same diameter, and screw that into the top. This next step is purely optional, and since I have a lathe, I decided to cut a funnel that would allow the candy to more easily make its way into the dispenser so that the candy didn't pool on the bottom of the flat surface of the mason jar lid. Here I'm epoxying the funnel that I just turned on the lathe into the mason jar lid. This step is also optional, and what I've done here is cut a 3-inch hole from a piece of plywood, rounded the edges, cut it down to size, and this is simply to cover the actual lid of the mason jar. Who's hungry? If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks.